Hey, it's TDA, and this is my guide to the full release version of Plan B Terraform. At the beginning of the game, I recommend that you zoom all the way out and that you press the left Alt button so you can easily see where the high and low areas on your map are. The light areas are where you typically want to stay away from because these are low areas with a low altitude, and that means that this is where your oceans are going to be once you start terraforming your planet. Similarly, there's probably going to be an ocean over here. So that means you want to start building your factories in areas more like this, where there's a more higher altitude. Not necessarily in the mountains, of course, because those will get in the way. Something like this could be perfect as well. It doesn't really matter that much, but just pick a location close to one of your cities that also has all the available resources that you need. So you want some aluminum, that's the gray thing over here. You want some silver, that's the yellow one, and some iron, that is the orange one. You also at some point are going to need that green one, but it's less important. So just focus on these three resources at first. And if you're really worried about where your cities are going to be placed, then zoom in a little bit further. These triangular areas, these little blue triangles, are going to be where your ocean is, and these lines are going to show you where the water is going to be flowing from your mountains to your oceans. Now, these thicker lines in particular are more likely to turn into actual rivers, especially if they're on the lower ground, like you can kind of see happening here. So stay away from areas like this, but in these areas you're probably going to be fine just building your factory, even though there's blue lines. In order to get yourself started, just pick any location that has iron. It doesn't need to be close to your actual cities, it can be anywhere on the map really. And start producing some extractors, some factories, and some assembly plants. And you do that by placing down a couple of these depots and make sure they are assigned to iron ore. So that means that once you place down the extractors next to them, they will start collecting that. And you place a factory right next to that, and that is going to be producing some steel. Now, you are also going to need another one of these depots then to receive that steel, and finally a assembly plant at the end of that to start making your first extractors. Now, by doing it like this, we have a total of 6 of these extractors, each making 15 iron ore per annum, and that means that we have a total of 90 production, which is also the same as a factory needs, because this is going to produce 30 steel bars per annum as well, but you need 3 times as much iron ore, so 3 times 30 is 90 input. You want to reproduce this same layout once more to make some depots, and then it's time to move on to the factories and assembly plants, which require a little bit more advanced materials. However, the principle remains exactly the same. Start with 6 extractors with 2 depots attached to them. Make sure you turn that into steel bars, then have another depot to receive those bars. Then a second factory this time around that is going to turn those bars into mechanical parts. And then another depot aside from that to export that. And then last but not least, we have an assembly plant making factories. And then you're going to duplicate this set once more to start making the assembly plants themselves. And then finally, before you move on, I would recommend at least doubling up on your extractor, depot, and factory production, because you're going to need a lot of these things, and this way, by setting it up right now, you'll never have to think about that pretty much ever again throughout the game. You're also going to need a similar setup to produce some trucks. And then it's time to start moving over to one of your silver nodes, anywhere on the map, doesn't matter where it is, and start making some concrete in a factory in a very similar way. It's worth noting that a factory makes 30 concrete per annum, and one of these assembly plants making roads actually only needs 10 of that per annum, so you can triple up on the assembly plants if you want to optimize your road production. And then finally, you're going to want to start using some more of that concrete to make supply centers. Now again, you can do this pretty much anywhere on the map, especially in the kind of ocean zones anyway, because you're going to be replacing all of this production later on anyway. So don't stress about where you build this too much. Okay, so it's time to start growing our cities, and in order to do that, we need to place a supply center next to that city, and you can check what this city needs. So right now it just needs concrete, which means it's time to start creating some more concrete and then building a road that starts out next to your depot where that concrete is actually being supplied to. And then you find your city once more, and you can build a road something like this. Now, in order to actually get stuff from A to B, you're going to go back to the starting location. You're going to select your truck, click that location next to your depot, and then the location that is going to be next to your city, like this. And then there's going to be a truck driving from A to B. It should be there already. Yep, there you go. Of course, this is not going to be anywhere near enough transportation. You can see that right now I can transport about 5 concrete per annum. I'm actually already producing 30 over here, so I might as well scale this up by adding some more trucks to the mix, so I can transport at least everything that I'm producing over here. In order for your city to actually receive those resources, you are going to need another depot for them to dump their stuff in, like this. And there you go, now we have our city being supplied with concrete. Now, this is again not enough, but you can see it needs only 10 per annum. I'm supplying it with 30 per annum right now with all of my trucks, so you should see your city starting to grow pretty soon. As your city grows, it will start adding new buildings to it. Now, sometimes these buildings can get kind of in the way. Don't worry, you can still delete those if you want. You can build roads right through your city, etc, etc. They will rebuild themselves as long as you keep supplying your city with enough resources. As a final note on cities, I would recommend, especially early on, that you just focus on a single city. But of course, if you find that fun, you can grow all your cities at the same time. That said, soon enough your city will be asking for oxygen, and you need the atmospheric extractor in order to make that, which requires aluminum bars along with mechanical parts to make. So you know what to do, make another production line to make mechanical parts and end with an assembly plant making the atmospheric extractor. However, you're also going to need to make some aluminum bars elsewhere. So find the nearest aluminum patch, set up a very similar production facility once more, and get your trucks to move everything from A to B, so this gets combined and you can start making your atmospheric extractors. Now, it's worth noting that if you set up a truck line like this and you do it the wrong way around for whatever reason, you can just use this reverse angle button to switch around what is the starting and end location of your thing. So you can always just build the other way around and just flip everything around. You can actually see this. If I do this, you can see the truck driving up and down depending on which button I press. Similarly, if you redesign your roads, you can just press this button and it will try to make a new connection if you, for whatever reason, you interrupted your roads. So all of that is very useful. Last but not least, you can use these buttons over here to easily switch between the start and end location, so you never have to look around where the hell your trucks are going. Initially, it's very easy to figure everything out, but once you have more things driving around your planet, it's going to get complicated really fast. Of course, we actually have to get the oxygen to our city, and I would recommend that you have a different supply center for every single type of resource that you bring to your city. Mostly because that helps you to easily track what is going where. It also means that it will be easier to scale things up later on. You don't need to do this once more, but I recommend that you do so anyway. Also, keep in mind that the larger your city grows, the more it will start to demand. So right now it's still at 10. One atmospheric extractor will be enough, but soon we'll need more than one anyway, so you might as well scale it up preemptively. Let your city grow a little bit further, and then you want to start mass producing depots Mark II. These are going to be making your life a lot easier than before. You still need aluminum bars for that, but you're going to need to produce some polymer along with that. Unlike the aluminum, polymer is actually made from carbon, which you can make by simply placing down some more of these atmospheric extractors. In order to make that, you're going to need, once again, 6 of these in order to completely satisfy a single factory, and that should start making you some depots Mark II. Now, I recommend at least making 2 of these assembly plants making these, because you're going to need a lot of these depots. These new depots have twice the range of your old ones, so that makes it a lot easier to set up your factories, and they also can transport twice as many items, so this is just going to speed everything up. Use your new toys to start making some reinforced concrete, and make sure that concrete gets all the way to your city in order to make sure you meet its new supply demands. Now, that also means that as soon as this starts arriving, you can take away the concrete because it no longer needs it. Using these same principles, just keep following the next steps throughout the game. So start making the new buildings that you unlock, start bringing the new resources that you need in order to make the production in those buildings, and where needed, deliver those resources to your cities in order to help them grow. Once your city grows to a size of 300, you're going to need to add in some waste disposal. So this works pretty much in the reverse way that your supply centers work. You place down a waste disposal and it will start producing waste. In order to get rid of that waste, you're going to need some recycling centers. You can build these as well, and those are going to actually recycle that waste into something useful. In the case of metal waste, this is going to transform back into steel bars and aluminum bars by means of a recycling center. And of course, in order to make sure that you can keep disposing your waste, you're going to actually need to make sure you use this production somewhere else in your factory, because otherwise this is going to fill up, it will backlog, and you will no longer be able to get rid of your waste and your city will stop growing. While there's different ways to handle waste, if you want to just get rid of steel bars, the easiest thing to do is just make extractors. It's not necessarily the best thing you can do, but at least it will make sure it doesn't back up. And for the aluminum bars, it's a little bit more tricky because there's nothing that just uses aluminum. However, if you combine it with some very easy to set up polymer bar production, because remember, you only need to make some carbon out of thin air for that, you can make high-tech parts, and you're going to need a lot of these throughout the entire game. Now, you can actually use this to supply your city as well. And if you do that, I would recommend that if you're making recycled high-tech parts, that you select your other supply centers that are using the new ones and make sure these are marked to be backup. That means that if you do that, it will prioritize this one first in order to consume the recycled ones before it starts using the newly produced high-tech parts. It's a kind of like a min-max thing to do, but it will make sure that you always use your recycled stuff first before you start making use of your new stuff. However, once you reach level 9, everything is going to completely change how you set up your factories, because you will now have access to trains, and these are much more efficient than your trucks. Trains work very similar to trucks, with the difference that they drive on railroads and that they need a loop in order to be able to get around. So what you can do is set up, for example, a mining field all the way like this. And by the way, this is very easy to do, because if you press Control while placing down, you can easily fill up an entire field like this. Very quick and easy. I actually missed a spot there. Look, there you go. And then what you can do is set up a train very much in a similar way to your trucks. So from A to B, and again, they will have a lot higher capacity. It just makes this a lot easier to do. You can have multiple trains on the same track. They don't collide with each other, so it should be very straightforward. Just make sure that there's a loop. Now, I recommend setting up dedicated facilities for every single product, and only a single facility for every product as well, so you can very easily keep track of how much you're producing, what is being underproduced, and what is being overproduced. To give you an example of what I mean, this is my factory in an early game state, so I have dedicated sections for every single type of resource, and I'm intentionally leaving some space in between each sector. Makes it look a little bit more clean, but more importantly, it makes sure you have enough space to put train stations over here and here for the inputs and outputs. If you put these too close together, you might run into a situation where you just run out of space to put more trains in there. Similarly, I also recommend that you set up your cities with their in and output, the waste and their supply, in such a way that it kind of corresponds to your factory. Again, it will just make things a lot more easy to coordinate and track. As your city is growing and growing, you will need to twist certain things. Now, don't be afraid to cut into your city a little bit. It might initially reduce in size quite a bit, as you can just see happen to me over here. But again, it will grow back over time. Similarly, I also recommend that you set up a dedicated spot somewhere on your planet that is going to build all the different buildings and materials that you need to expand your factory. The main reason I recommend that you do this is that it makes it very easy to track what you're actually still producing. And if you notice that at some point you have way more of a certain building than you're ever going to need, let's say you have 1.4k factories, well, you can just go to this area and you can say, okay, where am I producing my factories? Oh, over here. Well, maybe I should stop that for the moment until I actually need more. Once you have 3,000 people in your city, you're going to get access to the space elevator base, which you're going to supply with space elevator cables. In order to make these, what you're going to need to do is go to your city, and you will have to place down a construction site. This is a site that you're going to place in your city, and that is then going to specialize your city towards one out of 3 different specializations. Now, for some reason, this is one of the only buildings in the game that actually requires you to bring production items to it in order to build the second stage, which is going to be the specialized unit. Once they're done, these buildings are going to produce you some carbon nanotubes, and you're going to need a lot of those throughout the rest of the game, so I suggest you build at least 2 of them and have a sufficient amount of output supply for them as well. Once you deliver the required resources to the space elevator, it will turn on and it will start producing seeds, which means you can start growing food. Now, none of that is particularly complicated. Food does have 3 ingredients rather than just the normal 2 that we've been used to so far. But other than that, it's really straightforward. The seeds are being produced by the elevator. The compost is really easy to produce by some carbon and nitrogen, both of which are infinite. And water is pretty easy to produce as well, but you'll need to actually find yourself some water underground. Now, just to be clear, you don't necessarily need to put your pumps on water. In fact, you probably shouldn't, because this water is likely going to get deeper over time, and that might be an issue. If you press Alt again, just like at the beginning of the game, you can see which areas have groundwater in them, and you're looking for one of these areas that is at least a little bit light blue. If you're colorblind, that might be an issue, but some of these areas have not enough water in them, but you are going to have plenty of areas, as you can see over here, where you can place down these pumps. Once you have your food up and running, supply it to your city as well, and it should start growing again. Now, meanwhile, if you're worried about the water interfering with your factory, the very easy way to find that is watch for this button. If you click on that, it will bring you immediately to any of your factories that are either underwater or roads that are underwater, things like that, so you can easily fix that. Roughly around this time is also when you might want to consider starting to upgrade your second city, just to have it ready for when you actually need it. Once you reach a population of 10,000, it's time to start turning your planet green, and you're going to do that by producing some pine trees and eucalyptus trees. Eucalyptus trees are going to be best around the equator, while the pine trees are best just a little bit outside of that, where it's slightly colder. Now, don't worry, you don't actually have to go and plant entire forest by yourself. You can just place down a couple of these, and these will start expanding their greenness and grass, as you can see, including new trees around them. So just trickle them a little bit around fertile areas, and that will slowly but surely start expanding your forest all across the globe. And once you have enough trees around your planet to produce some oxygen, you'll have your first creatures starting to walk around. Once you grow to a population of 20,000, you're going to find out that the space elevator is no longer just producing seeds. You're actually going to need to deliver nanocomposite in order to get those seeds in return. So you better start doing that, because you don't have any other alternative to grow your own food. Food that goes in also needs to come out, so we will have to start dealing with organic waste. And honestly, that is pretty similar to what you've already been doing so far, with the difference is that you need to add some nitrogen to it to make more compost out of it. Now, I've actually found compost to be one of the hardest things to balance, because the organic waste is not going to be enough compost, but you definitely need to make sure that you don't overproduce your normal compost. And because it's so easy to produce, you tend to overproduce it like I'm doing over here. So yeah, just take care that you are actually making sure that you use your organic waste first, and then start adding in some additional compost production to fill out the remainder. At some point, the elevator will just completely stop delivering seeds, but that's not a problem, because as long as you keep delivering the nanocomposites, that problem will solve itself. Because at that point you will unlock the Botanical Research Center, which is going to allow you to produce your own seeds. More importantly, however, at least as important, you will be able to start making depots Mark III that are going to be much faster and even more easy to use than the previous version you have available. This is also where that second city is going to come in handy, because you can't actually build different types of research centers in the same city. So you're going to need that second city in order to build your Botanical Research Center. Keep growing your cities, and you're almost near to the end, because now you're going to be able to produce some quality food. But in order to do that, you're going to need to put down some farms in order to harvest actual resources from your own planet. In order to make your farms work, you're going to need some oxygen in the air, so that's just more pollution thrown up in the air. In this case, it's actually good global warming. And then you're going to need to find yourself a fertile location on your planet. That's typically these light locations you see on the map. Honestly, on this particular planet, I don't really have an awesome location, but the one I just showed you is pretty decent. So you're going to need a lot of real estate in order to take up a huge amount of farming area, because you're going to need a lot of food. Farms work a little bit different from most of the other buildings in the game. So you just place them down, and a little drone will start cutting out some land for you. Now, in order to actually make this farm work, you're going to need to put down a grain silo. And it needs to be close enough so it's actually connected with a dotted line. Now, you only need actually one grain silo, in theory, in order to have all your farms function, because you can actually chain farms together. So as you can see here, you just place them down, they have all this connected line, and they will connect together. Now, in order to get these farms to grow anything, you're going to need to get them field seeds, and you make those field seeds from transforming your normal various seeds into those using a food processor. Bring some of these upgraded seeds to your grain silos, and yes, you do want more than one, mostly for the throughput, and then your farms will start growing their own food. The harvest is then again going to be returned to those grain silos, so you also need an exporting station to do something with that, and then you can start making your quality food. At this point, your city should start to look pretty green, and the last few steps in the game are more or less a repeat of what we've already done, with some small twists, but I'll leave a little bit to your surprise in case you're following this step by step. Nothing that should shock you, but there's a little bit of a twist near the end of the game that I think is kind of fun. I didn't really mention the ships, mostly because while I was making this I didn't really need them, but ships work very similar to your railways, but the difference of course that they're going to go by sea now, and you won't have enough of these ships going from A to B because they're really slow, but other than that, just put some depots next to that, very similar to what we've already been doing with our supply depots. Now, I would also mention that just to be efficient, you might want to double up on some of your supply depots, because otherwise you don't have enough throughput, especially once your city starts reaching hundreds of thousands of people. Your demand will go up quite a bit. You can already see I'm producing almost 1,000 waste per annum. So in order to actually get that out of my city, I need a lot of these depots and a lot of trains. So make sure you keep up with that. But that should be pretty much the only thing that could get you into any trouble. As long as you keep focusing on your little setup over here, it's very easy to identify what you need more of. So just add that whenever you need it. Do make sure that you're not overproducing things that are also related to your waste. For example, you can see I have a bit of a compost problem over here, so I just deleted my compost factory temporarily, and then I'll just start adding it back in once I run out of compost. Similarly, you might run into some aluminum problems. That tends to be the other thing that is very hard to get rid of because it's not used in that many places, but you are going to be producing a huge amount of high-tech parts, so that is always a very easy dumping ground for that. All in all, I hope you found this guide useful. Make sure you like the video if you actually did find it useful, and of course consider becoming a member of the channel to help me out. Either way, if you're still here, you are awesome, and I do hope to catch you in the next one.